My grandfather always told me the ocean would be my sanctuary, but my parents turned it into a commodity. For 2 years, I believed their lie that his beloved beach condo was sold to cover estate taxes. I was the sensible daughter, the one who didn't ask difficult questions. That was my mistake. I never imagined that while I was mourning him, my own mother and father were forging my signature to steal the only thing he ever truly gave me. The invoices on my laptop screen were blurring together, a headache pulsing behind my right eye like a second, angry heartbeat. It was a Friday night in Arden Falls, and while most 32-year-olds were out for drinks or settling in for a movie, I was trying to reconcile a freelance marketing budget for a client who thought paying an exposure was a generous business strategy. I rubbed my temples and looked around my apartment. It was clean, but it was the kind of clean that hid the cracks. The laminate flooring in the hallway was peeling up at the corners, curling like dried leaves, and the air conditioner rattled with a mechanical wheeze every time it kicked on. This was my life. I was a senior marketing coordinator by day, a freelance copywriter by night, and perpetually exhausted by all of it. My phone buzzed against the cheap veneer of my desk. It was a text from my mother. "Elise, dinner is at 7. Do not be late. And please wear something that does not look like you pulled it out of a hamper." I stared at the screen, fighting the urge to throw the phone across the room. It was a classic Elise Bailey summons. No greeting, no question of my availability, just a command wrapped in a critique. My parents lived only 20 minutes away in Arden Ridge, but the distance between my life and theirs felt like crossing an ocean. They existed in a world of polished marble, investment portfolios, and country club memberships. I existed in a world of student loan payments and coupon clipping. I stood up and stretched, my back popping in protest. I had to go. Skipping a Bailey family dinner was not an option, not unless I wanted to deal with weeks of passive-aggressive voicemails about family loyalty and how much I had hurt my father's feelings. I walked to my closet and pushed past the practical blazers and worn denim. I pulled out a navy dress I had bought on sale 2 years ago. It was modest, clean, and boring. It was perfect armor. As I drove my 10-year-old sedan out of the dense, crowded streets of Arden Falls and toward the rolling hills of the Ridge, the atmosphere shifted. The streetlights changed from harsh sodium orange to tasteful, soft white LEDs. The houses pulled back from the road, hiding behind manicured hedges and stone gates. This drive always made me think of Grandpa Walter. Walter Bailey had been the anomaly in our family tree. My father, Martin, was obsessed with accumulation, accumulating wealth, accumulating status, accumulating envy, but his father, Walter, had been obsessed with living. He had made his money in hardware franchises, steady and unglamorous work, and he had never let the money change the way he took his coffee or the way he treated a waitress. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as the memories washed over me. For as long as I could remember, Walter had been my person. When my parents were too busy hosting galas or curating their social image to notice a lonely, awkward teenager, Grandpa Walter was there. He would drive up in his beat-up truck, tell my mother he was kidnapping me, and we would drive 3 hours to the coast, to the town of Seabrook Dunes. He owned a condo there. It was not a mansion. It was a second-floor unit in a complex called the Tides, right on the water. It smelled like salt and old paperbacks. I could still hear his voice, gravelly and warm, as clearly as if he were sitting in the passenger seat. "Vivi," he would say, using the nickname only he was allowed to use. "You have got a good head on your shoulders, better than mine, better than your dad's." Though do not tell him I said that. I remembered one specific afternoon, about 6 months before he died. We were sitting on the balcony, watching a storm roll in over the Atlantic. The sky was a bruised purple, and the waves were hammering the shore. We were eating pancakes for dinner because Walter did not believe in food rules. "You love it here, don't you?" he had asked, watching me stare at the ocean. "It is the only place I can breathe." I had told him, and I meant it, in Arden Falls. Under the microscope of my parents' expectations, I felt like I was constantly holding my breath. At the condo, I could exhale. Walter had reached out and covered my hand with his. His skin was like dry parchment. "One day, I want you to have this place. I am making sure of it. This will be your sanctuary. Vivi, a place no one can take from you." Tears pricked my eyes, blurring the taillights of the car in front of me. I blinked them away angrily. That promise had died with him 2 years ago. The memory of the weeks following his death was a blur of gray rain and black suits. I had been devastated, hollowed out by grief. My parents, however, had been efficient. The funeral was tasteful and quick. The reception was catered by the best firm in the city, and 3 days later, we had a family meeting in my father's study. I remembered sitting in the heavy leather chair, feeling small and numb. My sister, Harper, was checking her phone. Martin sat behind his desk, and Elise stood by the window, looking tragic in designer silk. "It is a mess, Vivian," my father had said, sliding a stack of papers across the desk that I could not read from a distance. "Your grandfather's estate. He was not as organized as we thought in his final years. There are debts, outstanding taxes, legal fees." "What about the condo?" I had asked, my voice trembling. "He told me he wanted me to have it." Elise had turned from the window, her expression pitying. "Oh, honey, Walter said a lot of things, but the reality is the liquidity just is not there. Everything was left to the family trust, and the trust has obligations to meet. We have to liquidate the asset to cover the estate taxes. Otherwise, we lose everything. Liquidate the asset." That was what they called his home. My sanctuary. "Is there no other way?" I had pleaded. "I can pay the taxes. I can take out a loan." Martin had sighed, the sound of a patient parent explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "It is too complicated. Vivian, you do not understand how these trusts are structured. We are doing this to protect you. If we transfer it to you, you would be buried in gift taxes and maintenance fees you cannot afford. Let us handle the heavy lifting. It is what we do." I had backed down. I was grieving. I was confused. And deep down, I still believed that my parents, for all their faults, would not lie to me about something so sacred. I trusted them. I pulled my car into the long, circular driveway of my parents' house. It was a sprawling colonial revival that looked less like a home and more like an embassy. The windows were glowing with warm light, staging a perfect scene for the neighbors. I parked behind a massive, gleaming black SUV, a Range Rover. It still had the temporary dealer tags on it. "Harper." I took a deep breath, checked my lipstick in the rearview mirror, and stepped out into the cool evening air. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, holding a glass of white wine. She looked impeccable. Her hair was a helmet of blonde highlights, and her skin was smooth, tight, and expensive. "You are here," she said, which was her version of a hello. She leaned in for a hug that involved no actual contact, just air kissing near my cheek so she would not smudge her makeup. "Did you come straight from work? You look exhausted." "Hello to you too." "Mom," I said, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled of lilies and lemon polish. It was the smell of judgment. "And yes, I have been working. It is a busy quarter. Always working, never advancing," she murmured, turning to lead me toward the dining room. "If you put half that energy into networking, you would be a partner by now. I am a coordinator." "Mom, partnership is not really how it works in my department." "Details." She waved a hand. In the dining room, the table was set for 5. My father sat at the head, nursing a scotch. He was a large man who took up space aggressively. Beside him sat Chase, my brother-in-law, a man with a smile that showed too many teeth and eyes that calculated the cost of your shoes while he shook your hand. And then there was Harper. My little sister was 29, 3 years younger than me, and lived a life that looked like an Instagram filter. She ran an online boutique that sold beige linen clothing at exorbitant prices, a business that I knew for a fact my father subsidized heavily every time she had a bad month, which was almost every month. "Viv!" Harper squealed, not getting up. She waved a manicured hand. "Oh my God, I love that dress. Is it vintage?" "It is just old," Harper, I said, taking my seat. Well, it is very sustainable of you, she said, flashing a smile at Chase. Dinner was a roasted chicken with vegetables that were too firm to be enjoyable. The conversation, as always, revolved around money, specifically, their money, and my lack of it. So, Martin said, slicing his chicken with surgical precision. Chase tells me you two are looking at the properties in the vineyard for August. Chase nodded, wiping his mouth. The market is tight. Martin, but we found a place near Edgartown. It is a splurge, but Harper has been working so hard on the spring collection. She deserves it. We are also thinking about Italy in the fall, Harper added, taking a sip of wine. Amalfi, just for a week or two. Wonderful. Elise beamed. Travel is the only thing you buy that makes you richer. That is what I always say. I poked at a carrot on my plate. That sounds expensive, I muttered, mostly to myself. The table went quiet. My father set down his fork. Vivian, he said, his voice dropping an octave. Do not be bitter. It is unbecoming. I am not bitter. I lied. I am just saying. A new Range Rover. Martha's Vineyard. Italy. That is a lot of overhead. It is called enjoying the fruits of success, Martin said. He looked at me with that familiar disappointment. Unlike some people, Harper and Chase understand how to leverage their assets. They take risks. You are still renting that shoebox in the city. You are throwing equity down the drain every month. I can't afford a down payment in this market. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, and I am paying off my student loans, the ones you said would build character if I paid them myself. We paid for Harper's school because she went to a private university that required our support. Elise interjected smoothly. You chose state. We thought you wanted the independence. The revisionist history was breathtaking. They had paid for Harper because Harper threw tantrums. They made me pay because I was the practical one, the one who could handle it. It is about financial responsibility, Martin lectured, pointing his knife at me. You work these long hours, weekends, freelance, and for what? You are spinning your wheels. If you had listened to me and gone into finance instead of whatever creative writing nonsense you do, marketing, I corrected, and I like my job. You like being broke? Chase asked, chuckling as if it were a joke between bros. I am not broke, I said, my face heating up. I am self-sufficient. I do not ask for handouts. The silence that followed was sharp. I saw Martin's jaw tighten. I had struck a nerve, hinting at the subsidies Harper received. Elise cleared her throat loudly. Well, we are just worried about you. Vivian, we do not want you to wake up at 40 with nothing to show for your life. It is self-sabotage. Really, working yourself to death for pennies. I took a long drink of water, forcing the lump in my throat down. Can we talk about something else? Please. The conversation shifted, drifting back to the safe harbors of country club gossip and stock market trends. I tuned them out, nodding mechanically whenever someone looked my way. I felt that old familiar sensation of being a ghost in my own family. I was present, but I was not really there, not in the way Harper was. After dessert, a flourless chocolate cake that tasted like dust, we moved to the living room for coffee. The tension had dissipated slightly, replaced by a lethargic post-meal haze. I was standing by the fireplace, looking at a framed photo of us from 20 years ago. We looked happy. I wondered if we were, or if I just did not know any better back then. Harper walked up beside me, holding a cup of espresso. She smelled like vanilla and expensive perfume. Sorry about Dad, she said, though she didn't sound sorry. He is just stressed about the merger. He is always stressed, I said. Harper sighed, leaning against the mantel. I miss Grandpa, she said suddenly. I looked at her, surprised. Harper rarely talked about Walter. She had found him boring. He didn't have connections, and he didn't buy her ponies. Me too, I said softly. It is just so sad that the condo had to go, Harper said, shaking her head. I was thinking about it the other day. Remember that awful shag carpet in the hallway? I am so glad they finally ripped that out. The hardwood underneath opens the space up so much. I froze, My coffee cup halted halfway to my mouth. "What?" I asked. Harper blinked, looking at me. "What?" "The carpet," I said, my voice slow. "You said you are glad they ripped it out. Who is they?" Harper's eyes darted to the side for a fraction of a second. A micro-expression of panic. The new owners. Obviously. How do you know the new owners ripped out the carpet?" I pressed. "Have you been there?" "No." Harper laughed. But the sound was brittle, high-pitched. "No, of course not. Mom mentioned it. Or maybe I saw it on Zillow when it sold. I don't know. Viv, why are you interrogating me? Mom mentioned it?" I looked across the room where Elise was laughing at something Chase said. "Mom hasn't been to Seabrook since the funeral." "God, you are so intense," Harper snapped, pulling away from the mantel. "I probably just dreamt it. Or I'm confusing it with Chase's parents' beach house. Just drop it." She turned and walked away quickly, putting the width of the room between us. She started talking loudly to Martin about the suspension on the new Range Rover. I stood there by the fireplace, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud against my ribs. The hardwood underneath opens the space up so much. That was a specific observation. It wasn't a guess. It was a visual confirmation. But the condo had been sold to a stranger 2 years ago. Why would Harper know what the floors looked like now? I left 20 minutes later. I cited a headache, which was not a lie. The drive home was a blur. I did not think about Grandpa Walter this time. I thought about Harper's face, the way her eyes had darted away, the way she had laughed that brittle, nervous laugh. Something was wrong. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was heavy. I kicked off my heels and threw my blazer on the couch. I felt restless, my skin prickling with a suspicion I could not name. I sat down at my laptop and opened it. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Harper was just an airhead who mixed up conversations. But I typed Seabrook Dunes into the search bar anyway. I scrolled through the general results. Tourism boards, weather reports, restaurant reviews. Then I went to a popular vacation rental site. I didn't even know what I was looking for. I just needed to see the town. I was about to close the tab when I saw it. It was a Facebook post on my feed, shared by a girl I went to college with, someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade. She had posted a series of vacation photos an hour ago. Best weekend ever. Found this hidden gem beach condo in Seabrook Dunes. Perfect girls' trip location. I clicked the link she had shared. It led to a listing on a high-end rental platform. The title of the property was The Coastal Haven. Luxury oceanfront escape. My breath hitched in my throat. I clicked through the photos. The first was the view from the balcony. I knew that view. I knew the exact angle of the dunes meeting the sea. I clicked to the next photo, the living room. My heart stopped. The walls had been painted a crisp, modern white, and the shag carpet was gone, replaced by gleaming honey-colored hardwood. But the furniture, there, in the center of the room, was the coffee table. It was a unique piece, a slab of polished driftwood on iron legs that Walter had commissioned from a local artist in the 90s. It had a distinctive knot in the wood that looked like a sleeping eye. I leaned closer to the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. I clicked to the next photo, the wall above the sofa, the painting. It was a watercolor of a lone seagull standing on a piling. It was not a valuable piece of art. It was something Walter had bought at a boardwalk art fair because he said the bird looked dignified. He had refused to replace it. Even when Elise begged him to put up something more abstract, it was still there. This was Grandpa's condo. I looked at the host information on the right side of the screen. I expected to see a name, a Smith family, or a John Doe. Instead, it read, hosted by Seabrook Shoreline Properties, LLC. I stared at the name. Seabrook Shoreline Properties, LLC. I had never heard of it. But if the condo had been sold to pay off debts, why was the furniture still there? Why would new owners keep a 30-year-old watercolor painting and a custom driftwood table? Unless they bought it fully furnished? But Harper knew about the floors. Harper knew it had been renovated. A cold dread settled in my stomach, heavy and sick. I pushed my chair back and stood up. I walked to the small closet in the hallway where I kept my winter coats and the few boxes of sentimental items I had dragged from apartment to apartment. I fell to my knees and dragged out a plastic bin. I rifled through old yearbooks and birthday cards until my fingers brushed against thick, cream-colored paper. It was a manila envelope. Walter had given it to me 3 months before he died. He had pressed it into my hands before I left the condo one Sunday evening. For Vivian. He had written on the front in his shaky, block script, "When you are ready," at the time. I had laughed and asked if it was his secret chili recipe. He hadn't laughed. He had just looked at me with those intense, watery blue eyes and said, "Just keep it safe, Vivi, and do not open it until you need to remind yourself of who you are after the funeral." I had been too heartbroken to look at it. I was afraid it was a letter saying goodbye. I wasn't ready to say goodbye, so I had buried it in this box, under layers of grief and denial. I held the envelope now. It felt heavy, heavier than paper should feel. My hands were trembling. I looked back at the laptop screen, at the glowing image of the seagull painting. Then I looked at the envelope. The inconsistencies nagged at me, the rushed sale, the liquidity excuse, Harper's slip-up. The fact that my grandfather, a man who planned everything, had supposedly left his estate in shambles. I took a deep breath, slid my finger under the flap of the envelope, and ripped it open. The paper inside the envelope was thin and yellowed at the edges, smelling faintly of the cedar box where Grandpa Walter kept his cigars. I pulled out a single sheet of lined notebook paper, the kind he used to keep score during our gin rummy games. His handwriting was unmistakable, a chaotic, slanted script that always looked like it was in a hurry to get off the page. "My dearest Vivi," the note began, "I know your father. I know he means well, or at least he thinks he does, but he sees the world as a ledger to be balanced. I see it differently. I want you to have a place by the water that no one can take from you, a place where you can just be Vivian, not Martin's daughter or Harper's sister, just you. I have taken care of the paperwork. Do not let them tell you otherwise. This is yours. Love, Grandpa." Below the note was a second document. It was a photocopy, grainy and slightly crooked, of a legal instrument. Across the top, in bold, capitalized letters, it read, "Warranty deed." I stared at the text, my eyes jumping over the dense legal jargon until they landed on the names. Grantor, Walter Bailey, grantee, Vivian Elise Bailey. The date on the document was October 14th, 2023. That was 4 months before he died. I sat there on the floor of my hallway, the plastic bin digging into my knees, and felt the world tilt on its axis. He had done it. He hadn't just promised. He had actually transferred the property to me while he was still alive. If this deed was valid, the condo had never been part of his estate. It had never been subject to the family trust. It had been mine the moment he signed it. So how did my parents sell it? I scrambled up from the floor, clutching the papers, and ran back to my laptop. My hands were shaking so badly I mistyped Seabrook County Recorder 3 times before I finally got to the right landing page. I navigated to the public records search portal. It was a clunky government-run site that looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. I typed Bailey, Walter into the grantor search field and hit enter. A list of results populated the screen. I scrolled down to October 2023. There it was. Document number 45920, warranty deed. Grantor, Bailey, Walter, grantee, Bailey, Vivian Elise. It had been recorded on October 16th, 2 days after he signed it. It was real. It was in the public record. For 4 months before his death, I had been the legal owner of the condo at the Tides, and no one had told me. But then I saw the next entry. My eyes drifted up the list, moving chronologically forward. February 2024, the month Grandpa died. Nothing. March, April, May. And then, in June 2024, 4 months after his funeral, there was another entry. Warranty deed. Grantor, Bailey, Vivian Elise, grantee, Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC. I froze. I stared at the screen, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Grantor. Bailey. Vivian Elise. That meant I had sold it, or given it away. I clicked on the document image. A PDF opened in a new window. It was a standard warranty deed, transferring the property from me to this limited liability company for the sum of $10 and other good and valuable consideration. I scrolled to the bottom of the second page. Above the black line labeled Grantor Signature, there was a scrawl of blue ink, Vivian E. Bailey. I leaned in until my nose almost touched the screen. The signature was looped and precise. It had the general shape of my signature, the tall V, the sweeping tail on the Y. To a stranger, it would look legitimate, but it was not mine. I did not cross my T's with a flat line. I used a sharp upward tick. I did not loop the bottom of the B. I kept it tight, and more importantly, I had absolutely no memory of signing this. I checked the date next to the signature. June 12th, 2024. June 12th? Where was I on June 12th of that year? I grabbed my phone and opened my calendar app, scrolling back frantically. June 12th, 2024. Marketing Summit. Chicago. I had been 500 miles away, sitting in a hotel conference room learning about search engine optimization algorithms. While someone in Arden Falls was signing my name to a legal document, I clicked back to the search results. I needed to see where it went next. 2 weeks after the deed transferring the condo to the LLC, there was another deed, Grantor. Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC. Grantee, Coastal Horizons Family Trust. The Coastal Horizons Family Trust. The current owners, the Whitakers from the reviews. I opened a new tab and searched for the business filings for Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC. It took me 5 minutes to find the Statement of Information on the Secretary of State's website. Manager, Martin Bailey. Member, Elise Bailey. The mailing address for the LLC was my parents' accountant's office in downtown Arden Falls. The pieces slammed together in my mind, forming a picture so ugly I wanted to look away. My parents had discovered that Walter had deeded the condo to me. Instead of telling me, instead of celebrating that Grandpa had secured my future, they had panicked. They needed the asset. So they created a shell company. They forged my signature to transfer the condo from me to their company. Then, they sold the condo from their company to an unsuspecting family. I went back to the recorder's site and looked for the mortgage documents related to the sale. I found the satisfaction of mortgage filed by the LLC. The sale price to the Coastal Horizons Family Trust was listed on the transfer tax affidavit, $850,000. My parents had sold my inheritance for nearly $1 million. And then I saw the final piece of the puzzle, a document that shouldn't have been viewable, but had been scanned in error with the closing packet, a disbursement sheet. It showed the payoff of a small existing equity line Walter had, the closing costs, and then a wire transfer of the net proceeds. Wire to Martin and Elise Bailey, joint account, ending in 4099, $780,000, wired directly to their personal bank account. I pushed my chair back from the desk, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It wasn't just the money, it was the calculated nature of it. They had to plan this. They had to hire a lawyer to draft the deeds. They had to find a notary who would notarize a forged signature. They had to list the property, show it, and close the sale, all while looking me in the eye at Sunday dinners and telling me I needed to be more financially responsible. I thought about the dinner tonight, Martin lecturing me about my rent, Elise calling my career self-sabotage. They were sitting on $750,000 of my money while I clipped coupons for laundry detergent. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the night printing everything, the deeds, the corporate filings, the disbursement sheet, the timeline from my calendar proving I was in Chicago. I organized it all into a neat stack, just like Martin would have done. By the time the sun came up, painting the sky a cruel, cheerful pink. I had a plan. I texted them at 7 a.m. Meet me at the Roasted Bean at 9. Coffee is on me. We need to talk. Elise replied almost instantly. Make it 9:30. Dad has a call. Is everything okay? You left in a rush last night. Everything is fine, I typed back. Just want to catch up. The roasted bean was a neutral zone. It was quiet, expensive, and public. I arrived 15 minutes early and secured a table in the back corner, away from the espresso machine's hiss. I placed my manila folder on the table and waited. They walked in at 9:35. They looked like the power couple of Arden Ridge. Martin was in a cashmere sweater and pressed slacks. Elise was wearing a silk scarf and oversized sunglasses. They waved at the barista and made their way to me, looking entirely unbothered. Good morning, darling, Elise said, sliding into the chair opposite me. She smelled of lavender and deception. This is a nice surprise. Usually, we have to drag you out on a Saturday. Martin sat down heavily. Checking his watch. I only have 30 minutes. Vivian, I have a tea time at 11. This won't take long. I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, detached, like I was speaking from underwater. I didn't order coffee. I didn't ask how they slept. I simply reached for the folder and opened it. I took out the photo of the rental listing first, the one with Grandpa's seagull painting. I slid it across the table. I found this online last night, I said. Elise picked it up, adjusting her sunglasses. Oh, what is this? A rental? Are you planning a trip? It is Grandpa's condo, I said, or rather, it was. Martin glanced at the photo, barely registering it. Yes, well, the new owners seem to be renting it out. That is common in Seabrook. Smart investment strategy. It is. I agreed, especially when you get the property for free. I slid the next document across the table. The copy of the deed from Walter to me. Grandpa left me the condo. I said, he deeded it to me in October of 2023, before he died, before the trust was even involved. Martin's hand froze on the handle of his coffee mug. He stared at the document, his eyes narrowing. Elise leaned in, her brow furrowed. Where did you get this? Martin asked, his voice low. It is a public record, Dad. Anyone can find it. I paused, and Grandpa left me a copy in a letter I finally opened. Well, Elise said, a nervous laugh bubbling up. There must be some mistake. Walter was very confused at the end. He was signing all sorts of things. He probably didn't know what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. I said, but that is not the issue. The issue is this. I slid the third document across. The forged deed transferring the condo from me to their LLC. This deed claims that I, Vivian Bailey, transferred the property to Shoreline Crest Holdings on June 12, 2024. That is your company. But I didn't sign this. Dad, I was in Chicago for work that week. The silence at the table was sudden and absolute. The clatter of spoons and the murmur of other conversations faded into the background. Martin picked up the document. His face didn't crumble. It hardened. It turned into stone. He looked at the signature. Then he looked at me. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a cold calculation. Elise looked pale. She reached out and touched Martin's arm. Martin, you are confused. Vivian, Martin said. His tone was dismissive, bordering on bored. You sign a lot of papers. When Walter died, there was a mountain of administrative work. You were emotional. You were grieving. You signed a stack of documents to help us clear up the estate. You probably just do not remember. I did not sign this, I repeated, pointing at the signature. Look at it. That is not my handwriting. And I was in another state. I have the plane tickets to prove it. Stop it, Elise hissed, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. Lower your voice. Why? I asked, leaning forward. Are you afraid someone will hear that you forged your daughter's signature to steal an $800,000 property? We did not steal anything. Elise snapped, her veneer of politeness cracking. That condo was part of the family assets. Walter bought it with family money. He had no right to just give it to you without consulting us. We put the money right back into the family pot. Which pot? I asked. The pot that bought Harper's Range Rover? The pot that is funding your European vacation? because it certainly didn't go into my pot. Martin slammed his hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. Enough. He glared at me, his face flushing red. You have no idea how estate law works. Vivian, these things are complicated. There are taxes. There are liens. There are implications you cannot possibly understand with your limited experience. We handled it. We took care of the mess Walter left behind so you would not have to. You should be thanking us, not accusing us. Thanking you? I stared at him, incredulous. For forging my name? That is a felony. Dad, that is fraud. Do not use that word, Martin warned, pointing a finger at my face. You are being dramatic and ungrateful. We have supported you your entire life. We paid for your braces, your car insurance, your lifestyle. I pay my own rent. I shot back. I pay my own bills. You act like I am a leech, but you just stole nearly $1 million from me. It was not yours, Elise cried out, tears welling in her eyes. Tears of frustration. Not remorse. It was for the family. You are trying to tear this family apart over a piece of property. How can you be so selfish? Harper needs help with her business. Ideally, we all benefit when the family does well. Why do you always have to keep score? I looked at them, really looked at them. For 32 years, I had thought their criticism came from a place of love. I thought they pushed me because they wanted me to be better. But looking at them now, Martin's arrogant rage, Elise's twisted victimhood, I realized the truth. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an asset to be managed, or a liability to be minimized. I was just another column in Martin's ledger. I am not keeping score, I said quietly. Gathering my papers, I am looking at the evidence, and the evidence says you are criminals. You walk away now, Martin said, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. And we forget this little outburst. You go home, you calm down, and you trust your parents to manage the family wealth. But if you push this, Vivian, if you try to embarrass us, you will regret it. You have no resources. You have no connections. You are a marketing girl in a rented apartment. Do not pick a fight you cannot win. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly, but I forced them to hold me. I am not the one who picked this fight. I said, you did, when you signed my name. I turned and walked out of the cafe. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes boring into my spine. I made it to my car before I started hyperventilating. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel, gasping for air as the world spun around me. They hadn't denied it. Not really. They had justified it. They had admitted it and told me I was wrong to care. I needed to talk to someone sane. I drove straight to Mariah's apartment complex on the other side of town. Mariah had been my best friend since freshman orientation. She worked in human resources for a large manufacturing firm, which meant she had a low tolerance for nonsense and a very high understanding of compliance and legal lines. She opened the door in her pajamas, hair wrapped in a towel. One look at my face, and she pulled me inside without a word. Coffee or tequila? She asked. Both. I said. 10 minutes later, we were sitting on her couch. I had spread the documents out on her coffee table, covering the stack of fashion magazines. Mariah read through them in silence. She read the note from Grandpa. She studied the deeds. She looked at the timeline. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. Viv, she said, her voice serious. This is not a family squabble. This is not a misunderstanding. This is straight up textbook title fraud and grand larceny. They said it was complicated. I said, my voice trembling. They said estate law is messy. Estate law is messy. Mariah agreed. But forgery is simple. You cannot sign someone else's name to a deed. Period. It does not matter if they are your parents. It does not matter if they meant well, which, by the way, they clearly did not. They stole this property. They stole the equity. She pointed to the signature on the LLC deed. That is a crime. And the notary who stamped it also committed a crime. And transferring the money to their personal account? That is money laundering or wire fraud. Hearing her say the legal terms made it real in a terrifying way. They threatened me. I whispered, Dad said I would regret it. He said I have no resources. That is how bullies talk, Mariah said fiercely. He is counting on you being too scared to do anything. He is counting on you being the good daughter who keeps the peace. But Viv, there is no peace here. They declared war on you 2 years ago. You just didn't know it yet. She reached out and took my hand. You need a lawyer, a real one, not a family friend, not someone your dad plays golf with. You need a shark, and you need to do it Monday morning. I don't know if I can sue my own parents, I said, tears finally spilling over. It will destroy everything. Harper, the extended family, everyone will hate me. They already disrespected you, Mariah said softly. They erased you, Viv. They looked at your grandfather's last wish for you, his attempt to give you security, and they said, "No, we want that money for ourselves. That is not family. That is predation." I stayed at Mariah's for dinner. We ordered pizza and watched bad reality TV, trying to numb the shock. But the anxiety was a constant hum under my skin. I went home around midnight. My apartment felt colder than usual. I checked the locks twice. A newfound paranoia settling in. I couldn't sleep. So I opened my laptop again. I went back to the rental listing. There was a new review posted just that afternoon. It was from a user named Sarah W. My husband and I just spent a week here with our toddler, and it was magical. You can feel the love in this place. It has such a cozy, grandfatherly charm. The old books, the painting of the seagull. We are hoping to buy a place like this someday, but for now, we are just grateful the owners share this slice of heaven. It feels like a home. I read the review 3 times. You can feel the love in this place. They were talking about Walter's love. The love he had poured into those walls. The love he had meant for me. My parents were selling access to my grandfather's love for $300 a night, while telling me I was ungrateful for objecting. I looked at the photo of the seagull painting again. Walter had told me, "It is dignified. It stands its ground." I closed the laptop with a snap. My father was right about one thing. I didn't have his money. I didn't have his connections. I was just a marketing coordinator in a rented apartment. But I was Walter Bailey's granddaughter, and I was the legal owner of that condo. I was not going to let them take it. I was not going to let them gaslight me into silence. I pulled out a notepad and wrote down a single line. Find a lawyer. The tears were gone. In their place was something colder, harder. It was the feeling of a boundary finally being drawn. They had crossed the line, and now they were going to have to answer for it. The office of Dana Coyle was located in a renovated brick building in downtown Arden Falls, sandwiched between a bakery and a dry cleaner. It was a far cry from the glass and steel towers where my father's attorneys operated, places with marble lobbies and receptionists who looked like runway models. Dana's office smelled of coffee and old paper. It felt grounded. It felt real. I sat in the waiting room, clutching my manila envelope so tightly my knuckles were white. I had checked my bank account 3 times in the car, just to make sure I had enough to cover the consultation fee. $250 for an hour. To my parents, that was a bottle of wine. To me, it was my grocery budget for the month. When the door opened, a woman in her late 40s stepped out. She had sharp, intelligent eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses and wore a sensible gray blazer. She didn't look like a shark. She looked like a librarian who could take you down in a debate. "Vivian Bailey?" she asked. Her voice was calm, authoritative. "Yes," I said, standing up. My legs felt heavy. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "Come on in," she said. Holding the door open, her office was lined with bookshelves, overflowing with thick legal volumes and binders. I sat in one of the leather chairs opposite her desk. I felt small. I felt ashamed. There is a specific kind of humiliation in admitting that your own parents might be criminals. It felt like a betrayal of the natural order of things. "So," Dana said, opening a notepad and clicking her pen, "you mentioned on the phone that there is a title dispute regarding a property in Seabrook Dunes. Why don't you start from the beginning?" I took a deep breath and laid the documents out on her desk. The timeline, the letter from Grandpa Walter. The deed transferring the condo to me. The forged deed transferring it to the LLC. The final sale documents to the Whitakers. I told her everything. I told her about the estate taxes lie. I told her about the meeting at the coffee shop, about Martin's arrogance and Elise's tears. I told her about the signature that wasn't mine. Dana listened without interrupting. She didn't gasp. She didn't shake her head. She just watched me, her eyes moving from my face to the documents and back again. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Dana picked up the copy of the deed transferring the property to Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC. She adjusted her glasses and studied the signature at the bottom. "You are absolutely certain you did not sign this?" she asked. "I was in Chicago," I said, sliding the printout of my flight confirmation and conference agenda across the desk. "I have the receipts. I was at a marketing seminar at the exact time this was notarized in Arden Falls." Dana nodded slowly. She set the paper down. "Vivian," she said, and her tone had shifted. It was no longer the polite tone of a consultation. It was the serious, weighted tone of an advisor delivering a diagnosis. "This is not a family misunderstanding. If what you are telling me is true, and if these documents are what they appear to be, this is a serious felony. We are looking at title fraud, forgery, and grand larceny." Hearing a stranger say it made the air leave my lungs. "What does that mean for the condo?" I asked. "Can I get it back?" Dana leaned back in her chair, tenting her fingers. "Here's the basic principle of property law. A forged deed is void ab initio. That is Latin for void from the beginning. It is a nullity. It has no legal effect. If you did not sign that deed, it did not transfer ownership to your parents' LLC, and if the LLC did not own it, they could not legally sell it to the Coastal Horizons Family Trust. So the sale is invalid?" "Technically, yes," she said, "but it is complicated. The current owners, the Whitakers, are likely what we call bona fide purchasers for value. They bought the property in good faith, unaware of the fraud. They paid fair market value. They have title insurance. If we pursue this, we are not just fighting your parents. We are creating a nightmare for that family." I thought of the review I had read. "You can feel the love in this place." I thought of the toddler taking first steps on the hardwood floor. "If I sue," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "what happens to them? Do they lose the house?" "It is a distinct possibility," Dana said honestly. "If the court rules the deed was forged, the title reverts to you. The Whitakers would lose the home. They would then have to sue their title insurance company to get their money back. And the title insurance company would then go after your parents to recover the loss. It is a domino effect." "And my parents?" Dana looked me in the eye. "If we prove fraud in civil court, the judge is often obligated to refer the matter to the district attorney. Your parents could face criminal charges. Prison time is not out of the question for this amount of money." I felt nauseous. Prison. My father, who panicked if his scotch wasn't the right temperature. My mother, who couldn't handle a chipped nail. "I don't want them to go to jail," I said. "I just want what Grandpa left me. I want them to acknowledge what they did." "You may not be able to control the train once it leaves the station," Dana warned. "But let us look at the evidence first. The signature." She pulled out a magnifying glass from her drawer, an actual, old-school magnifying glass, and peered at the signature on the forged deed. Then she asked to see my driver's license. She looked back and forth between them for a long minute. "It is a good forgery," she murmured, "but it is stiff. See here?" She pointed to the top of the B in Bailey. "On your license, the loop is fluid. It is one motion. On the deed, there is a hesitation mark, a tiny dot of ink where the pen paused. That happens when someone is tracing or simulating a signature. They are drawing the name, not writing it." She looked up at me. "We need a forensic document examiner. I know a good one in the city. He is expensive, but his testimony is ironclad. We also need to subpoena the notary's logbook. Every notary is required to keep a journal of who appears before them, what ID they showed, And when, if you were in Chicago, you obviously did not appear, that logbook will either show a falsified entry, which implicates the notary, or no entry at all, which proves the document is fake. How much? I asked, dreading the answer. The retainer for the lawsuit would be $5,000, Dana said gently. The forensic expert is another $2,000. Costs will add up. $7,000. That was my entire savings account. That was my emergency fund, my car repair fund, my escape fund. I know it is a lot, Dana said, seeing the panic on my face. But Vivian, you are fighting for an asset worth nearly $1 million, and you are fighting for your own history. You have to decide if that is worth the cost, not just the money, but the war. Because once we file that complaint, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. I looked at the envelope on the desk. For Vivian, when you're ready. I thought about Martin's face at the cafe. You have no resources. Do not pick a fight you cannot win. I reached into my purse and pulled out my checkbook. My hand shook as I wrote the check, but I didn't stop. Do it, I said. I want to hire you. The following week was a blur of anxiety. I went to work every day, sat at my desk, and pretended that my life wasn't imploding. But the stress was like a low-grade fever, constant and draining. I made mistakes, stupid mistakes. On Tuesday, I sent a draft campaign to a client instead of the final version. It had a placeholder image that said, "Insert logo here in bright red letters." The client was furious. On Thursday, I completely forgot about a strategy meeting with the creative director. I was in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine, mentally calculating how long it would take for the title insurance company to respond to a demand letter. When my boss, Sarah, found me. "Vivian?" I jumped, spilling hot coffee on my hand. "Yes, sorry. I am just grabbing caffeine." Sarah stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. She was a nice woman, but she had deadlines to meet. "We have been waiting in the conference room for 10 minutes. This is the second time this week you have dropped the ball. Is everything okay?" "Yes," I lied, wiping my hand with a napkin. "I am sorry. Just a lot on my mind. Family stuff." "I understand family stuff," Sarah said, her voice cool. "But I need you to maintain focus here. We have the quarterly review coming up. You are usually my most reliable coordinator. I need you to be present." "I know," I said. "It won't happen again." But I knew it might. How could I care about click-through rates on a detergent ad when I was preparing to accuse my parents of grand larceny? That weekend was Harper's 30th birthday. Under normal circumstances, I would have made an excuse. I would have claimed a migraine or a work emergency. But Dana had advised me to act normal. "Do not tip your hand until we are ready to file," she had said. "Let them think you were cowed by their threats." So I put on a dress, pasted a smile on my face, and drove to the Obsidian, the most expensive steakhouse in Arden Falls. The family was gathered in a private booth in the back. Martin and Elise were there, looking regal and unbothered. Harper was wearing a glittering silver dress, laughing loudly at something Chase was saying. "There she is," Harper cried when she saw me. "The busy bee. We thought you were going to bail." "Happy birthday, Harper," I said, handing her a small gift bag. It contained a scarf I could barely afford. "Thanks, Viv," she said, tossing it onto the pile of gifts without looking inside. "Sit next to Dad." I sat. The proximity to my father made my skin crawl. He smelled of expensive cologne and scotch, the same smell that had once made me feel safe. Now, it just smelled like arrogance. "Glad you could make it, Vivian," Martin said, not looking at me. He was scanning the wine list. "I assume you have calmed down since our little chat?" "I am working on it," I said neutrally. "Good," he said. "Emotional outbursts do not suit you." The dinner was an exercise in torture. I watched them eat Wagyu beef and truffle mac and cheese. I watched them laugh and toast to Harper's success, to Chase's promotion, to the family legacy. It was a play, and they were all performing their roles perfectly. "We are thinking of diversifying the portfolio," Chase said halfway through the meal, swirling his red wine. Commercial real estate is soft right now, but residential in the coastal markets is booming. We are looking at picking up another rental property, maybe down south. Smart, Martin nodded. Real estate is the only real wealth. I felt a flash of hot anger in my chest. Real estate is the only real wealth, especially when you steal it. I took a sip of water, my hand trembling slightly. I decided to test the waters. It is funny you mention real estate, I said, keeping my voice light. I was actually talking to a lawyer earlier this week about some property laws. It is fascinating how complicated it can get. The reaction was subtle, but because I was looking for it, I saw it. Harper's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened, just a fraction, and darted to Martin. It was a look of pure panic. Martin didn't freeze. He just stopped chewing. His jaw muscles worked slowly, grinding the steak. He set his knife down with a deliberate click. "A lawyer?" Elise asked, her voice a pitch too high. "What kind of lawyer? I thought you worked in marketing." "Oh, just a consultation," I said, spearing a piece of broccoli. "About that project I mentioned, the complicated one." "Well," Elise said, her smile tight and brittle. "Let us not talk shop on Harper's birthday. It is a celebration. Harper, tell us more about the trip to Italy. Are you doing Rome or Florence first?" She steered the conversation away with the force of a tugboat, but the energy in the booth had shifted. The air was thin. Harper barely touched her food for the rest of the night. She kept glancing at me, then at Martin, looking like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the parents to notice. She knew, my little sister, the golden child, knew about the fraud. She might not have been the mastermind, but she was complicit. She knew they had stolen my inheritance, and she had accepted the fruits of that theft, the subsidies for her business, the trips, the lifestyle. I left the dinner early, claiming a headache. No one argued. The next morning, Sunday, my phone rang at 10 o'clock. It was Martin. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart hammering against my ribs. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but Dana had said, "Gather information," I answered. "Hello?" "Vivian," Martin said. His voice was warm, fatherly. It was the voice he used when he wanted to sell something. "I was thinking about you this morning. You seemed tense at dinner last night." "I am fine, Dad." "Listen," he sighed. "I know things got heated at the coffee shop the other day. Your mother and we hate to see you upset. We know you are under a lot of pressure with work and bills. We want to help." "Help how?" I asked, walking into my kitchen and grabbing a pen. "I have been looking at the accounts," Martin said. "And I think we can structure a gift, a generous cash gift, to help you with a down payment on a place of your own, or to pay off those student loans you are always worrying about." "A gift," I repeated. "How generous?" $50,000, he said. The number hung in the air. "Wired to your account tomorrow. $50,000. It was more money than I made in a year. It would change my life. It would wipe out my debt." "And what is the catch?" I asked. Martin chuckled. A dry, dismissive sound. "No catch, honey. Just parents helping their daughter. However, to keep the accountants happy, and to make sure everything is clean for the estate planning, we would need you to sign a simple document, just a standard release form, clarifying that you consent to the way the Seabrook property was handled and that you have no further claims against the estate, just to avoid any unnecessary legal chaos down the road. You know how lawyers are." My grip on the phone tightened. There it was, the bribe, the hush money. He wasn't offering me a gift. He was buying my silence. He was asking me to retroactively validate the forgery for pennies on the dollar. He had sold my condo for $850,000, and he was offering me $50,000 to go away. "So," I said slowly, "you want me to sign a paper saying I agreed to sell the condo to your LLC, even though I didn't?" "It is just paperwork, Vivian," Martin said, his voice hardening slightly. "It corrects the record. It protects Grandpa's legacy. Do you really want to drag his name through the mud with a public dispute? Do you want to ruin Harper's reputation? This is a win-win. You get the money you need, and the family stays intact. I closed my eyes. I thought about Grandpa Walter. I thought about him sitting on the balcony, eating pancakes, a place no one can take from you. If I took the money, I was selling him out. I was agreeing that he didn't matter, that his wishes didn't matter. I can't do that, Dad, I said. Vivian, Martin warned. Do not be stupid. 50,000 is a lot of money. It is not about the money, I said. It is about the truth. You forged my signature. I am trying to offer you a lifeline, Martin shouted, his mask slipping. You take this deal, or you get nothing. You will bankrupt yourself trying to fight us. I will bury you in legal fees. I will make sure you never work in this town again. If it is just a generous gift, I said, my voice shaking but loud, then put it in writing. Send me the offer in an email. Send me the document you want me to sign. I am not putting anything in an email until you agree verbally, he spat. Then we have nothing to talk about, I said. And Dad, if you contact me again, have your lawyer do it. I hung up. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped the phone on the counter. 5 minutes later, my email pinged. It was from Martin. Subject: Settlement. Offer Vivian. Per our conversation, attached is the draft release of claims. Upon execution, we will wire $50,000 to your account as a family gift. This offer expires in 24 hours. Be smart. He had sent it. His arrogance was so absolute that he didn't even realize he had just handed me a smoking gun. He was so used to controlling the narrative that he thought an email threatening me to sign a release for a fraudulent transfer was a power move. I forwarded the email to Dana Coyle immediately. Subject: FWD. Settlement offer. Message. He just sent this. He offered me $50,000 to sign a release about the condo. Dana called me 10 minutes later. She sounded energized. This is it. Vivian, she said. This is consciousness of guilt. An innocent person does not offer $50,000 to clarify a signature unless they know the signature is bad. He just handed us the keys to the case. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Dana said. We take off the gloves. I am sending the formal demand letter today. To your parents, to the LLC, and to the title insurance company. We are alleging fraud, forgery, and conversion. We are attaching the forensic report on the signature and this email. Is there any going back? I asked, looking out my window at the gray parking lot of my apartment complex. No, Dana said softly. The moment I send this, the war starts. Are you ready? I took a deep breath. I felt the fear, sharp and cold. But underneath it was something else, a solid, heavy resolve. I was done being the practical one. I was done being the ghost. Send it, I said. The demand letter went out on Monday morning via certified mail and courier. Dana explained to me what it said. It was a legal grenade. It stated clearly that the deed was a forgery, that the transfer was void, and that unless the matter was resolved immediately, we would be filing a civil complaint and seeking punitive damages. It also put the title insurance company on notice that their policy was triggered. I went to work on Tuesday feeling like I was walking on a wire. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. At 2 p.m, my phone lit up with a text from Harper. What did you do? Then another. Mom is hysterical. Dad is screaming at his lawyer on the phone. They say you are suing us? Are you insane? I didn't reply. Then, a text from my cousin. Jenna. Viv. I just heard something crazy from Aunt Elise. Please tell me you aren't trying to get your parents arrested. We are family. It had started. The smear campaign. The twisting of the narrative. I put my phone on silent and turned it face down on my desk. I focused on my spreadsheet, row after row of data, clean, logical, undeniable data. I was terrified. I felt sick to my stomach, but for the first time in 2 years. I didn't feel helpless. I wasn't just Vivian the marketing coordinator anymore. I was the plaintiff. and I was coming for what was mine. That evening, I went to the gym and ran on the treadmill until my legs burned and my lungs screamed. I needed to exhaust the anxiety out of my system. When I got back to my apartment, there was a voicemail from Dana. "Vivian, call me back. The title insurance company just contacted me. They are taking this very seriously. They are launching their own investigation, and they have notified the current owners. The Whitakers know." I sat down on my couch, the sweat drying cold on my skin. The Whitakers, the young couple with the toddler, the ones who felt the love in the walls. They knew. They knew that their dream home was a crime scene. They knew that someone was coming to take it away. I closed my eyes and whispered an apology into the empty room. "I am sorry. I am so sorry. But I can't let them win." The battle lines were drawn. The silence was over. And in the quiet of my apartment, I prepared myself for the noise that was about to begin. The silence that followed the demand letter was not peaceful. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a vacuum before the seal breaks. For the first 2 days, my phone did not ring. My email did not ping with notifications from my mother or sister, but the digital excision was swift and surgical. I was sitting at my desk on a Wednesday morning, nursing a lukewarm coffee, when a notification banner slid across my phone screen. "You have been removed from Bailey Family Updates." I stared at the screen. That group chat had been active for 7 years. It was where we shared birthday wishes, holiday plans, and photos of Harper's latest vacations. It was a trivial thing, really, mostly emojis and requests for casserole recipes. But seeing that little gray text box felt like a door being slammed in my face. Then came the removal from the Cousins Christmas group. Then the Thanksgiving logistics thread. One by one, the digital tethers to my family were severed. My parents were not just ignoring me. They were quarantining me. They were cutting off the infection before it could spread. By Thursday, the silence morphed into noise. It started with a text from my cousin Jenna, the one who lived in the city and usually stayed out of the Arden Falls drama. "Viv, I just got off the phone with Aunt Elise. She sounds devastated. She said you are suing them? What are you doing? Is this about the condo?" I typed out a reply. Then deleted it. I typed another. Deleted that too. "It is complicated." I finally sent, "She says you are having a breakdown." Jenna replied, "She told my mom you are being manipulated by some predatory lawyer who smells money. Viv, are you okay? You know how much Uncle Martin has done for you." I felt a cold flush of humiliation creep up my neck. Having a breakdown, that was the narrative. Not that I had discovered a forgery, not that my inheritance had been stolen, but that Vivian was unstable. It was a brilliant strategy. It played perfectly into the existing family dynamic. Harper was the success. I was the struggler. Of course the struggler would snap. Of course the one who couldn't afford a house would lash out at the parents who had everything. I went to the grocery store that evening, the high-end market in the town center where everyone shopped. I turned into the produce aisle and saw Mrs. Gable, a woman who had been my mother's bridge partner for 20 years. She had known me since I was in braces. "Hello, Mrs. Gable," I said, forcing a smile. She looked up from a display of organic avocados. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition. Then, her face went blank. It was a mask of polite confusion, as if she were looking at a stranger who had mistaken her for someone else. She didn't speak. She just gave a tight, barely there nod, turned her cart around, and walked briskly toward the bakery section. I stood there, gripping the handle of my basket, feeling the blood drain from my face. I had been erased. My parents had leveraged their social capital, their country club standing, their charitable donations, their carefully curated image, to isolate me completely, to Mrs. Gable, and likely to half of Arden Falls. I was no longer Vivian Bailey, the nice marketing girl. I was Vivian the pariah, Vivian the ungrateful daughter who was suing her own mother. I went home and cried for an hour. Then I called Dana. "They are freezing me out," I said, my voice thick. They are telling everyone I am crazy. That is the playbook, Dana said. Her voice was steady, an anchor in the storm. They are trying to break your resolve emotionally because they know they cannot win legally. Do not engage. Do not defend yourself to the neighbors. Save it for the room. The room? We have a response, Dana said. The title insurance company has acknowledged the claim. They are launching a full investigation. And because the potential liability is so high, we are talking nearly $1 million plus legal fees, they have requested a preliminary mediation before we file the formal complaint in court. They want to see if this can be resolved quietly. Do I have to see them? I asked, my stomach twisting. Yes, Dana said. You, me, your parents, their counsel, and the title rep. It is going to be uncomfortable. Vivian, I need you to be ready. What about the current owners? I asked. The Whitakers? They have been notified of a potential title defect, Dana said. They won't be at the mediation, but they are aware that their ownership is being challenged. I received a copy of the notice sent to them. Later that afternoon, Dana emailed me the case file updates. I opened the PDF labeled Subject Property, Occupancy Status. Attached was a photo taken by an investigator, likely just to confirm the property was inhabited. It showed the front door of the condo. Standing on the porch was a young woman holding a toddler on her hip, while a man in a baseball cap unlocked the door. They looked normal. They looked happy. They looked like they were building a life. I stared at the toddler's chubby legs. I stared at the potted plant by the door, a plant I knew my grandfather hadn't put there. These were the people I was hurting. If I won, they lost. They would lose their home, yes. They would get their money back eventually from the insurance. But they would lose the place where their child took first steps. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. I wanted to close the file. I wanted to call Dana and say, forget it, let them keep it. But then I looked at the other document in the file. The timeline of the sale, the wire transfer to my parents, the date of the forgery. My parents had done this to the Whitakers, not me. Martin and Elise had sold a stolen car to an innocent driver. If I stopped now, I wasn't saving the Whitakers. I was just letting my parents get away with the crime. I am ready, I whispered to the empty room. The mediation was held 2 weeks later in a conference center near the courthouse. It was a neutral space. Beige walls, gray carpet, generic abstract art. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt like a meat locker. I arrived early with Dana. I was wearing my best suit, a charcoal gray blazer that I had tailored myself, and I had pulled my hair back into a tight bun. I needed to look severe. I needed to look like I wasn't having a breakdown. We sat on one side of the long oval table. The mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, sat at the head. He was a soft-spoken man with kind eyes and a demeanor that suggested he had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. Just breathe, Dana murmured to me, arranging her files with precise geometric alignment. Let me do the talking unless they ask you a direct question, and even then, look at me before you answer. At 9 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Martin and Elise walked in. They looked like they were arriving for a photo shoot. Martin was wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my car, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. Elise was in a cream-colored sheath dress and pearls, clutching a designer handbag. They radiated wealth and injured dignity. They were flanked by their attorney, a man I recognized from the billboards on the highway, Richard Vance. He was known as the bulldog of the bar. He was expensive, aggressive, and loud. Behind them trailed a younger man in a cheap suit, the representative for the title insurance company. He looked tired already. Martin and Elise didn't look at me, not once. They pulled out their chairs and sat down, arranging themselves with an air of long-suffering patience. It was as if they were indulging a toddler's tantrum. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson said, clasping his hands. "We are here to discuss the title dispute regarding the property at 42 Ocean View Drive, Seabrook Dunes. The goal today is to see if we can reach a resolution without the need for prolonged and costly litigation." He turned to Dana. Ms. Coyle, this is your client's claim. Please summarize. Dana stood up. She was smaller than Richard Vance, but she commanded the room instantly. The facts are simple, Your Honor, she said, using the mediator's former title out of respect. My client, Vivian Bailey, was the legal owner of the subject property as of October 14th, 2023, via a valid warranty deed from her grandfather, Walter Bailey, on June 12, 2024. A second deed was recorded purporting to transfer that property from Vivian Bailey to Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC, an entity controlled by Martin and Elise Bailey. Vivian Bailey did not sign that deed. Her signature was forged. Therefore, the transfer is void, and the subsequent sale to the Coastal Horizons Family Trust is invalid. Richard Vance leaned back in his chair, chuckling softly. It was a theatrical, condescending sound. With all due respect, Vance said, his voice booming. This is a classic case of seller's remorse. Ms. Bailey is a young woman with, let us say, financial challenges. She agreed to transfer the property to the family LLC to consolidate assets for the estate. She signed the document. Now, 2 years later, she sees the market has gone up, or perhaps she is just angry about some other family slight, and she decides to cry wolf. Elise spoke up then. Her voice was trembling, perfectly calibrated to sound like a heartbroken mother. We only wanted to help her, she said, looking at the mediator with wide, watery eyes. Walter, my father, he always intended for the condo to be for the whole family. He never would have wanted it to cause this kind of division. Vivian knew that. She signed the paperwork to help us clear up the tax burden. She must have forgotten. She was so emotional after the funeral. I did not forget, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Martin's head snapped toward me. His eyes were cold, hard flints. Vivian, he said, his tone warning. Do not lie to these people. You signed it. You were sitting right there at the kitchen table. Which kitchen table? I asked. Ours, Martin said smoothly. A Sunday brunch. You came over. We discussed the taxes, and you signed it. Don't you remember? Gaslighting. He was rewriting history in real time, with such confidence that for a split second, I questioned my own sanity. Did I? Did I sign something I didn't read? But then Dana placed a hand on my arm, the anchor. Let us look at the document, Dana said. She projected an image onto the screen at the end of the room. It was a high-resolution scan of the forged deed. I looked at it. It was the first time I had seen it this large. Vivian E. Bailey. The signature was blue ink on white paper. It was elegant. It looked like my name, but as I stared at it, the knot in my stomach tightened into a painful cramp. The V had a flourish at the top, a little loop. I never looped my V's, and the Y at the end trailed off straight. I always curved mine up. This is the document in question, Dana said. Recorded June 12th, notarized by a Jane L. Prentice. Ms. Prentice is a respected notary, Vance interjected. She has been working in the county for 30 years. I am sure she has, Dana said. Mr. Mediator, if I may? Mr. Henderson nodded. Dana clicked a button, and the screen changed. It showed a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the signature from the deed. On the right were 10 signatures taken from my canceled checks, my lease agreement, and my driver's license spanning 5 years. These are known samples of Vivian Bailey's signature, Dana said. Even to the naked eye, the differences are apparent. The slope is different. The pressure points are different. Handwriting changes, Vance scoffed, especially when someone is stressed or grieving. Perhaps, Dana said, but ink patterns do not lie. We had this document examined by a forensic document examiner, Dr. Aris Thorne. His preliminary report, which I have copies of for everyone, indicates that the signature on the deed shows signs of hesitation and tremor consistent with simulation. in layman's terms. Someone was drawing the signature, not writing it. There are microscopic stops in the ink flow where the pen lifted, likely to check the reference model. Martin shifted in his chair. He adjusted his tie. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You are wasting our time with CSI nonsense." "There is more," Dana said. She didn't raise her voice. She just kept laying down the bricks, one by one. She clicked the remote again. The deed was notarized on June 12, 2024, in Arden Falls. The notary block states that Vivian Bailey personally appeared before the notary. "So?" Elise asked, looking nervous now. "On June 12, 2024, Dana said. Vivian Bailey was 300 miles away. She pulled up a new slide. It was a collage of documents, an airline ticket confirmation, a hotel receipt from the Cedar Glen Marriott, a copy of a conference badge with a time-stamped photo. Vivian was attending the Midwest Digital Marketing Summit in Cedar Glen, Dana said. She checked into the hotel on June 11th and checked out on June 13th. We have the hotel folio. We have the Uber receipts from the Cedar Glen airport. It is physically impossible for her to have been at your kitchen table in Arden Falls signing a deed on June 12th. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was the silence of a trap snapping shut. The representative from the title insurance company sat up straighter. He picked up the copy of the travel receipts Dana had slid across the table and studied them intently. He looked at Martin, then at the receipts, then at Martin again. "Mr. Vance," the title rep said, his voice cool. "Can you explain this discrepancy?" Richard Vance looked at the screen. He looked at his clients. The confidence was draining out of his face, replaced by the calculating look of a lawyer realizing his clients had lied to him. "My clients?" Vance started, then paused. "My clients may be mistaken about the specific date. Perhaps the notary backdated it for convenience. That happens. Backdating is also fraud," Dana pointed out. "But we subpoenaed the notary's journal." She dropped a heavy-bound photocopy onto the table. "This is Jane Prentice's logbook. There is an entry for June 12th. It lists Vivian Bailey as the signer. It lists a driver's license number as identification." Dana paused for effect. "The license number listed in the logbook? It is expired. It is Vivian's old license number. From 3 years ago. The one she replaced when she moved apartments. The one her parents might have had a photocopy of in their old files. But Vivian had a new license on that date, with a different number. If she had truly appeared before the notary, she would have presented her current ID. The only way that old number gets in the book is if someone gave the notary an old copy." The air in the room seemed to vibrate. Martin's face had turned a mottled, angry red. Elise was gripping her handbag so hard her knuckles were yellow. "This is a setup," Martin hissed. He slammed his hand on the table. "She is staging this. She is manipulating the dates. You are trying to make us look like criminals." "Martin," Vance warned, putting a hand on his client's arm. "Quiet." "I will not be quiet," Martin shouted, his voice cracking. "I am the one who built this estate. I am the one who paid for that condo's maintenance for 20 years. Walter didn't know what he was doing. He was senile. He gave it to her because he wasn't in his right mind." "Martin, stop," Elise whispered, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at the title rep, who was furiously taking notes. We just cleaned up the paperwork. That is all. It was a mess. We just made it right. We didn't steal anything. It was all going to the family anyway." "We just cleaned up the paperwork." It was an admission. It wasn't a confession of guilt in their eyes. It was a justification. But legally, it was fatal. She had just admitted they manufactured the deed to fix the estate. "I think, Mr. Henderson said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "that we need to take a break." He looked at Martin and Elise with a gaze that was no longer kind. It was severe. "This mediation is suspended," he said. "Mr. Vance, I suggest you confer with your clients. The allegations here have moved beyond a simple title dispute. We are bordering on criminal conduct." Martin stood up so fast his chair tipped over. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he was going to come across the table. His eyes were filled with a hatred I had never seen before. It wasn't the disappointment of a father. It was the rage of a predator who had been caught. "You are dead to us," he spat. "You understand? You have no family." "I know," I said. My voice was shaky, but I held his gaze. "You made that clear when you stole from me." Vance practically shoved them out of the room. The title rep lingered, shook Dana's hand, and gave me a long, searching look. "We will be in touch," he said. "This changes things." When we were finally alone in the room, I slumped back in my chair. I felt exhausted, hollowed out. "You did good," Dana said softly. "They cracked. They gave us everything we needed." "It doesn't feel like a win," I said. "It feels like a funeral." I walked out to the parking lot alone. Dana had stayed behind to file some paperwork with the mediator. The sun was shining, bright and cruel, reflecting off the rows of cars. I was fumbling for my keys when I heard a voice. "Viv." I turned. Harper was standing by the back bumper of my sedan. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat, looking like she was trying to be invisible. She must have been waiting in the car while our parents were inside. I stopped. I didn't walk toward her. I just stood there, using the distance as a shield. "Harper," I said. She took a step forward, her hands twisting the belt of her coat. I heard Dad yelling," she said. "When they came out, Mom is crying in the car." "I am sure she is," I said. "Viv, please," Harper said, her voice cracking. She pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "You have to stop this. You are going to send them to jail. Do you realize that? Dad is talking about indictments. About prison. I didn't do the crime. Harper," I said. "I am just the one who turned on the lights. They are our parents," she pleaded. "They made a mistake, okay? They messed up, but they did it for us, to keep the business afloat, to keep the lifestyle, everything. For us?" I laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "They did it for you. Harper, the money went to your boutique. The money went to your Range Rover. Did you know that? Did you know you are driving my inheritance?" Harper flinched. She looked down at the pavement. I knew they sold the condo," she whispered. "I knew it was weird that you didn't know, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. I thought maybe you made a deal with them." "You knew," I said. "You saw the furniture in the rental photos. You knew about the floors. You lied to my face at dinner." "I was scared," Harper cried. "I am scared now. Viv, just take a settlement. They will give you money. Just drop the lawsuit, please. If this goes to trial, it destroys everything. The family name, the business. Chase will leave me if the money dries up. Please." She was begging for her life, not her actual life, but the life she had curated, the life of easy money and willful ignorance. I looked at my sister. I remembered playing Barbies with her. I remembered holding her hand when she got her ears pierced. I loved her. Part of me still wanted to protect her. But I looked at her fear, and I realized it wasn't fear for me. It wasn't fear for the Whitakers. It was fear for her own comfort. "I can't do that," I said. "Why not?" she demanded. "Why do you have to be so self-righteous?" "Because silence is complicity." "Harper," I said. The words tasted like ash. "You knew something was wrong, and you looked the other way because it paid for your vacation. That makes you just as guilty as them." Harper stared at me. Her face hardened, the sadness replaced by the same cold entitlement I had seen in Martin. "Fine," she said. "Burn it all down. But don't expect anyone to be there when the ashes settle. You will be all alone." "I have been alone for a long time," I said. "I just didn't realize it until now." I unlocked my car and got in. I started the engine and reversed out of the spot, leaving my sister standing in the middle of the parking lot, small and shrinking in my rearview mirror. I drove away from the mediation center, away from my family, and toward a future that was terrifyingly uncertain. But as I turned onto the highway, I realized that for the first time in years, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. The bridge was burned, there was no going back, and in the smoke, I could finally breathe. The case was filed on a rainy Tuesday in late October. Bailey versus Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC et al. It was a dry sequence of words for something that felt like a grenade thrown into the center of my life. In the legal community of Arden Falls, however, it was becoming a quiet spectacle. Property disputes were common, but a daughter suing her prominent country club parents for title fraud? That was gossip fuel. My life bifurcated into two distinct realities. In one, I was Vivian the employee, trying to care about marketing analytics and click-through rates while my brain felt like it was packed with cotton. In the other, I was Vivian the plaintiff, spending my lunch breaks on the phone with Dana Coyle and my evenings drowning in discovery documents. The financial strain was immediate and suffocating. Legal fees were a hungry beast. I burned through my savings in the first month. I started taking unpaid days off work to attend hearings and review documents, which shrank my paycheck just as my expenses ballooned. One evening in November, I sat at Mariah's kitchen table, staring at a disconnect notice from the electric company. "I can cover it," Mariah said, sliding a plate of spaghetti toward me. She didn't ask. She just stated it. "I can't take your money, Mariah," I said, rubbing my face. "I already owe you for the retainer top-up." "You are not taking it. You are borrowing it," she corrected, pouring 2 glasses of cheap red wine. "Consider it an investment in the takedown of the century. Besides, if you lose power, you will come crash here anyway. And you snore when you are stressed. Paying your bill is actually a selfish act on my part." I laughed, but it was a weak sound. "I feel like I'm drowning. Maybe I should have just taken the $50,000. "Don't you dare," Mariah said, pointing a fork at me. "You are in the messy middle. This is the part where they want you to quit. That is why they make it expensive and exhausting. But wait until you see what Dana sent over today." I looked up. "The discovery dump?" "The emails," Mariah said, her eyes dark. "I helped you sort through the first batch, remember? Vivian, it is worse than we thought." The next morning, I sat in Dana's conference room, faced with 3 bankers' boxes of printed emails and financial records that the court had ordered my parents to produce. "Prepare yourself," Dana said, sliding a specific stack toward me. "These are internal communications between your father, your mother, and Harper from the month following your grandfather's death." I picked up the top sheet. It was an email from Harper to Elise, dated March 3rd, 2024. Subject: Re. Signatures for the transfer mom. "I talked to Dad. He says we need to get the condo title moved before the end of the quarter if we want to use the equity for the loan. I know you are worried about asking Viv to come in and sign stuff, especially since she is being so mopey about the funeral. Why don't we just use Viv's digital signature scan? You know, the one from that loan app she used when she bought her car. We have the file on the family server. It would save time, and we don't have to drag her into lawyer meetings where she might ask a million questions." I read it twice. My breath hitched in my throat. Don't have to drag her into lawyer meetings where she might ask a million questions. It wasn't just Martin and Elise. It was Harper, my little sister, who had cried in the parking lot about being scared, had actively suggested the method of the forgery. She had suggested using my own digital footprint against me to steal my inheritance. "She suggested it," I whispered. "Harper suggested it." "It gets clearer," Dana said, handing me another sheet. "Look at the motive." This was an email from Martin to his accountant, with a copy to Elise. Subject: Ridgepoint liquidity. "We need to shore up the Ridgepoint project immediately. The commercial lenders are getting skittish about the occupancy rates. If we can liquidate the Seabrook asset quickly, we can inject $800,000 into Ridgepoint and stabilize the debt service. I need the deed transfer expedited so we can list it. do whatever it takes. Ridgepoint. I knew that name. It was a strip mall development on the edge of town that my father had bragged about for years. He always presented it as a gold mine. In reality, it was a sinking ship, and he had used Grandpa's condo, my condo, as the life raft. But the most nauseating revelation came from the bank records. Dana had highlighted the disbursement of the sale proceeds. The money hadn't just gone to Ridgepoint. Transfer, $75,000 to HB, boutique operating account. Transfer, $40,000 to Chase Harper. Travel fund. I stared at the numbers. $75,000 to Harper's successful business. $40,000 for a second honeymoon. The narrative they had spun, that they were protecting the family estate, collapsed into dust. It was pure, unadulterated self-interest. They had stolen my house to pay for Harper's inventory and a trip to the Maldives. They had erased me to subsidize the golden child. I felt physically ill. I stood up and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. I looked down at the street, at the people walking by, unaware of the betrayals happening in the offices above them. "Are you okay?" Dana asked. "I funded her," I said, my voice shaking. "I am sitting in my apartment with peeling linoleum, stressing about $100 electric bill, and I funded her boutique. I funded her vacation." "Yes," Dana said. "You did." I turned back to her. The nausea was fading, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "I want to depose them. I want to look them in the eye and ask them about this." "We will," Dana promised. "But first, they get to depose you." My deposition took place 2 weeks later in the plush, mahogany-paneled conference room of Richard Vance's law firm. The air smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. I sat at the long table, Dana next to me. Across from us sat Richard Vance, looking like a predator who had just spotted a wounded gazelle. Martin and Elise were not present. Clients usually weren't for the opposing party's deposition, but I could feel their presence in the room. In the specific lines of attack Vance had prepared, a court reporter sat at the end of the table, fingers hovering over her stenography machine. "Ms. Bailey," Vance began, leaning back in his chair. "Let us be frank. You are struggling financially, are you not?" "I pay my bills," I said calmly. Dinah had coached me for hours. Short answers, don't elaborate, don't get angry. "But you have significant student debt," Vance pressed. "You rent a modest apartment. You have no significant assets. Is that correct?" "That is correct." "And your sister, Harper?" Vance smiled, a shark-like baring of teeth. "She is quite successful, isn't she? Owns her own business, owns a home, drives a luxury vehicle." "She appears to be successful." "Yes," I said. "It must be difficult," Vance said, his voice dropping to a sympathetic purr that felt slimy. "To be the older sister, yet to be left behind, to watch her thrive while you struggle." "Objection," Dana said boredly. "Relevance?" "It goes to motive," Vance snapped. "I am establishing that the plaintiff is motivated by jealousy and financial desperation. She sees a chance to grab a piece of the family wealth that she feels entitled to." He turned back to me. "Isn't that what this is really about? Ms. Bailey, you are 32 years old, unmarried, underemployed, and you are jealous of your sister. So you concocted this story about a stolen condo to punish your parents for favoring her." I felt the anger flare in my chest, hot and sharp. He was painting me as the bitter spinster, the failure. He was using my own struggles caused by my parents' neglect, as a weapon against me. I took a breath. I thought of Grandpa Walter. I thought of the way he looked at me, with respect, with pride. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice steady, "I am not jealous of my sister. I love her, and I am not desperate. I work hard for what I have." "Then why sue your own parents?" he challenged. "Why destroy the family reputation?" "Because my grandfather made me a promise," I said. "He told me he wanted me to have a place where I would be safe, a place that was mine, He deeded that condo to me months before he died. He trusted me with it. My parents did not just steal a piece of property. Mr. Vance, they stole his final wish. They erased his decision because they thought they knew better, because they thought I didn't matter. Vance stared at me. He had expected me to crack, to cry, to scream. He hadn't expected dignity. You claim you didn't know about the transfer. Vance pivoted, shuffling his papers. But we have testimony that you were present at family dinners where the estate was discussed. Are you saying you simply didn't listen? I am saying I was lied to, I said. I was told the condo had to be sold for taxes. I trusted my parents. I didn't think I needed to audit them. Trust, Vance scoffed. Convenient. It was, I agreed. For them? The deposition lasted 4 hours. Vance tried every trick. He tried to confuse me on dates. He tried to make me admit I was confused by legal paperwork, but I had the receipts. I had the flight logs. I had the truth. By the time we walked out of the building, I was exhausted, but I felt lighter. I had walked into the lion's den and walked out without a scratch. The real damage, however, was done in the pretrial hearings. We had hired Dr. Eris Thorne, a forensic document examiner with 40 years of experience. He was a small man with thick glasses and a demeanor that was entirely devoid of emotion. To him, ink on paper was a math problem, and he had solved it. The hearing was to determine the admissibility of his testimony. The courtroom was nearly empty, save for the lawyers, my parents, and a few curious onlookers, including a reporter from the Arden Falls Gazette. Doctor, Thorne set up an easel with large foam core boards. Exhibit A, he said, pointing to a blown-up image of the signature on the deed. This is the questioned signature. Note the start of the letter V. There is a heavy ink deposit, known as a blob, which indicates the pen rested on the paper before the motion began. This is characteristic of someone hesitating, preparing to copy a form. He pointed to a second board. Exhibit B. This is Ms. Bailey's genuine signature from a lease agreement signed 2 weeks prior to the questioned date. Note the fluidity, the speed, the lack of pen lifts. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have identified 14 distinct points of dissimilarity between the questioned signature and the known exemplars. Furthermore, under microscopic examination, I found evidence of guidelines, faint indentations in the paper where a signature may have been traced from another source. It is my professional opinion that the signature on the deed is a simulation. Martin was sitting at the defense table. He wasn't looking at the charts. He was staring at the table. His jaw clenched so hard a muscle was jumping in his cheek. Elise was looking at Dr. Thorne with wide, terrified eyes, as if he were a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, except the rabbit was a felony indictment. But the document expert was just the warm-up. The turning point came when we subpoenaed Jane Prentice, the notary public. Jane was a woman in her 60s with a nervous habit of smoothing her skirt. She had been a notary for decades. She had a pension to protect. And when she sat in the witness chair for her deposition, which was read into the record at the hearing, she chose self-preservation over loyalty to the Baileys. Dana read the transcript aloud to the court. Question. Ms. Prentice, do you recall notarizing the deed on June 12th? Answer. I do. Question. Did Vivian Bailey appear before you on that date? Answer. Pause. Not physically. Question. Explain what you mean. Answer. I was contacted by a paralegal I know, Sarah Jenkins. She used to do freelance work for Martin Bailey's company. She brought me the document. She said Vivian had signed it earlier but couldn't make it to the office because of work. She said it was urgent for the family. I have known Martin for years. I thought it was fine. I did it as a favor. Question. So you notarized a signature you did not witness? Answer. Yes. I regret it. I thought I was helping. The admission hung in the air of the courtroom like smoke. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clerical error. It was a conspiracy. A paralegal associated with Martin had physically trafficked the forged document to a friendly notary to bypass the law. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Alvarez, looked over her glasses at the defense table. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice icy, "this testimony suggests a coordinated effort to fabricate a legal instrument. This court takes the integrity of the public record very seriously. I am allowing the expert testimony, and I am allowing the notary's admission into evidence at trial." Vance looked defeated. He nodded curtly. "Understood, Your Honor." Martin looked like he had been struck. The narrative of Vivian is crazy was dead. The narrative of innocent mistake was dead. Now, the only narrative left was criminal conspiracy. As we left the courtroom, I saw them, the Whitakers. They were standing near the elevators, talking to their own lawyer. The husband, David, looked tired, holding a briefcase. The wife, Sarah, the one who had written the review, looked like she had been crying. I froze. This was the collateral damage. Sarah looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened. For a moment, I thought she would scream at me. I thought she would accuse me of ruining her life. Instead, her shoulders slumped. She looked at me with a profound, exhausting sadness. It was the look of someone who knew she was caught in a storm she didn't create. I wanted to walk over to them. I wanted to say, "I am sorry. I don't want your house. I just want my father to stop lying." But I couldn't. My lawyer was pulling me toward the exit, and their lawyer was steering them toward the stairs. We were enemies on paper, even if we were both victims in reality. The interaction haunted me for days. I sat in my apartment, looking at the legal bills, looking at the evidence of my parents' greed, and I felt a strange hollowing out of my victory. I was going to win. The evidence was overwhelming. But winning meant evicting a young family. Winning meant destroying the home they had built. "Is there another way?" I asked Dana the next day. "Another way to what?" "To fix this, without kicking the Whitakers out." Dana sighed, taking off her glasses. "Vivian, legally, if the deed is void, the property is yours. The Whitakers lose. They get a claim against the insurance, but they lose the house. That is the law." "But is there a settlement?" I asked. I don't know. Can I let them stay?" "You could," Dana said slowly. "You could negotiate a settlement where you ratify the deed in exchange for a massive payout from the insurance company and your parents. Basically, you agree to sell it to them now, for fair market value plus damages." "But then my parents get away with it," I said. "They don't face the consequences." "Oh, they will face consequences," Dana said grimly. "The insurance company is already preparing a subrogation suit against them, and the judge." "Vivian, you need to prepare yourself for the criminal aspect." "The criminal aspect," I repeated. "Judge Alvarez is not happy," Dana said. "With the notary's admission, this has crossed the line into serious white-collar crime. I have heard whispers that she is preparing a referral to the district attorney's office regardless of the civil outcome: forgery, wire fraud, subornation of a notary." I sat back in my chair. "Prison?" I asked. "For Martin?" "Possibly," Dana said. "He is the manager of the LLC. He is the one who directed the funds. Elise might get hit with conspiracy. Harper, she is on the emails. Vivian, if the DA digs deep enough, they might look at her too." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I had wanted justice. I had wanted them to acknowledge me. I had wanted them to stop treating me like a ghost. I hadn't wanted to be the reason my mother went to prison. "I need to think," I said. "You have time," Dana said. "The trial is set for next month." "But Vivian, you cannot save everyone. You can save the house, or you can save your parents, or you can save the Whitakers, but you cannot save them all. Someone is going to pay for this." I went home and stood on my balcony, looking out at the city lights of Arden Falls. I thought about the email from Harper. Don't have to drag her into lawyer meetings. I thought about the money in her boutique. I thought about the Whitakers' toddler. I thought about Grandpa Walter, telling me, "A place no one can take from you." He hadn't just meant the physical condo. He had meant my dignity, my sense of self. My parents had tried to take that. They had sold it for $800,000. I realized then that the dread I felt about the criminal charges wasn't regret. It was grief. It was the final death of the fantasy that I had a family who loved me. If they went to prison, it wouldn't be because I sent them there. It would be because they valued money more than they valued their own daughter. I went back inside and texted Dana. No settlement with the parents. We go to trial, but see if we can talk to the Whitaker's lawyer about a leaseback option if we win. I don't want to throw them on the street. It was the only compromise I could live with. I would fight the monster, but I wouldn't become one. The trial date loomed on the calendar like a storm front. Dark, inevitable, and charged with lightning. I was ready. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but the air inside was thick enough to choke on. The rain had been hammering Arden Falls for 3 days, and the gray light filtering through the high windows made everyone look pale and washed out. The gallery was surprisingly full. There were the usual courthouse regulars, retired lawyers and bored students, but there were also faces I recognized. Neighbors, former friends of my parents. A reporter from the local paper scribbling in a notepad. The scandal of the Bailey family had bled out of the country club and into the public square. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from shaking. Dana was beside me, a pillar of calm in a navy suit. Across the aisle, Martin and Elise sat with Richard Vance. They looked diminished somehow. Martin's suit was still expensive, but his posture was slumped. Elise was wearing dark glasses, which she had only just removed at the judge's request, revealing eyes puffy from lack of sleep. The Whitakers were there too. Sitting in the front row of the gallery, Sarah looked terrified. David was holding her hand so tightly his knuckles were white. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Alvarez swept into the room. She was a formidable woman with a reputation for zero tolerance for theatrics. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and looked down at us. "We are here for the matter of Bailey versus Shoreline Crest Holdings, LLC," she said. "Let us proceed." I was the first witness. Walking to the stand felt like walking through water. I swore the oath, sat down, and looked out at the room. I tried not to look at my parents, but my eyes were drawn to them. They were staring straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge me. Dana led me through the basics, my name, my relationship to the defendants, the timeline of events. Then, she shifted the focus. "Vivian," Dana asked gently, "tell the court about your relationship with your grandfather, Walter Bailey." I took a deep breath. He was my best friend. My parents were always busy with work and social events. Grandpa Walter was the one who showed up. He taught me how to drive. He taught me how to fish. "And the property in Seabrook Dunes?" Dana asked. "Did he ever discuss his intentions for it with you?" "Many times," I said. A lump formed in my throat. It was our place. He used to take me there when things were hard at home. I remember when I was 15. We were walking on the boardwalk, and there was an art fair. I saw this watercolor painting of a seagull. It wasn't anything fancy, just a bird standing on a piling, but I liked it. I told him it looked lonely but strong. The courtroom was silent. Even the scratching of the reporter's pen stopped. "He bought it for me," I continued, my voice trembling. "He hung it over the sofa in the condo. He told me, 'Vivi, this bird is you, and this place, it will always be waiting for you. No matter what happens, you will always have a nest here.'" I looked at the judge. He promised me that condo not because of the money, but because he knew I needed a place where I felt safe, where I wasn't judged. My voice broke on the last word. I saw the court reporter pause, her hands hovering over the keys, waiting for me to compose myself. "He deeded it to me in October," I whispered. "He kept his promise. I didn't know about it until I found the letter, but he kept his promise." "Thank you, Vivian," Dana said softly. "No further questions." As I stepped down, I saw Sarah Whitaker wipe a tear from her cheek. Then came the defense. Martin took the stand first. He tried to project the image of the benevolent patriarch, the man who carried the weight of the family on his shoulders. "Mr. Bailey?" Richard Vance asked. "Why was the property transferred to the LLC?" "It was an administrative decision," Martin said, his voice smooth but tight. "The estate was complex. Walter left debts. We needed liquidity to manage the taxes and the upkeep. We consolidated the assets to protect the family's financial health." "And did you believe you had Vivian's consent?" "Absolutely," Martin said. Nodding, "We discussed it as a family. Vivian was fully aware that the condo was part of the larger estate plan." Dana stood up for cross-examination. She didn't shout. She just held up a piece of paper. "Mr. Bailey," she said, "you claim this was about estate taxes, yet I have here an email from you to your accountant dated March 5th. In it, you state, 'We need to shore up the Ridgepoint project immediately. The commercial lenders are getting skittish.' Do you recall writing that?" Martin hesitated. "I write many emails." "The email continues," Dana read. "If we can liquidate the Seabrook asset quickly, we can inject $800,000 into Ridgepoint. Mr. Bailey, did you sell your daughter's condo to pay estate taxes, or did you sell it to save your own failing commercial development?" "It is all the same pot," Martin snapped, his composure cracking. "The family money is the family money." "And the $75,000 transferred to your daughter Harper's boutique?" Dana asked. "Was that also estate taxes?" Martin turned red. "We support our children." "Some of your children," Dana corrected. "You supported one child by stealing from the other." "I did not steal," Martin shouted, slamming his hand on the rail. "I managed. She would have wasted it. She doesn't understand finance." The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Bailey, lower your voice." Elise was next. She was a wreck. Her testimony was a rambling mix of excuses and self-pity. She claimed she didn't know the technical details, that she just signed what Martin told her to sign, that she thought I had agreed. "Mrs. Bailey," Dana asked, "did you ever ask Vivian directly if she signed the deed?" "I assumed she did," Elise stammered. "You assumed," Dana said. "But you received an email from Harper suggesting you use Vivian's digital signature scan. Did you reply to that email?" "I don't remember," Elise whispered. Dana projected the email onto the screen. Elise's reply was short. "Good idea. Let us get it done." "Is that your email address?" Dana asked. Elise put her face in her hands and began to sob. "I just wanted everyone to get along. Why are you doing this? Vivian, how can you do this to your own mother?" She looked at me from the stand, her face streaked with mascara. "I gave you life, and you are destroying us over a house." I looked back at her, feeling a strange detachment. "You didn't give me life. Mom," I thought, "you gave me a role, and I am done playing it." Then it was Harper's turn. My sister walked to the stand looking like she was walking to the gallows. She was wearing a modest black dress, no jewelry. She looked young. "Harper," Dana said, "did you know Vivian owned the condo?" "I knew Grandpa talked about it," Harper said, her voice barely audible. "Did you know about the forged deed?" Harper looked at Martin. Martin stared back, his eyes hard. "I knew we were moving the title," Harper said. "I didn't know it was illegal." "You suggested using Vivian's digital signature," Dana said. "Why?" "Because—" Harper stopped. She looked at me. For the first time in years, her eyes were unguarded. "Because it was easier." "Easier than asking her?" "Easier than dealing with her," Harper blurted out. "Vivian, she always gets the boring share. She is the practical one, we thought. We thought if we told her about the condo, she would just keep it. She would live there or rent it out for peanuts. She wouldn't leverage it. She wouldn't use the equity." "So you decided she would waste it?" Dana asked. "We thought she would waste it on rent or something," Harper admitted, her voice trembling. "We needed the capital. Ridgepoint was in trouble. My store needed inventory. It just made sense. It was for the greater good." The words hung in the air. We thought she would waste it on rent. It hit me like a physical punch. They didn't just steal from me because they were greedy. They stole from me because they had absolutely no respect for me. To them, my life, my rent, my bills, my independence was a waste. My stability was less important than Harper's inventory. The courtroom was dead silent. Harper looked down at her hands, realizing what she had just confessed. She had confessed that they viewed me as a resource to be harvested, not a person to be respected. The rest of the trial was a blur of technicalities. Doctor, Thorne presented his charts, showing the hesitation marks in the forged signature. Jane Prentice, the notary, testified via video deposition, confirming she never saw me. By the time closing arguments ended, there was no doubt left in the room. The defense, that I had consented, that it was a misunderstanding, had been shredded. Judge Alvarez called a recess. We waited in the hallway for 2 hours. I sat on a wooden bench, staring at the floor. Dana brought me a cup of coffee, but I couldn't drink it. When we were called back in, the atmosphere was electric. The judge took the bench. She had a stack of papers in front of her. "Please be seated," she said. She looked at Martin and Elise, then she looked at me. "The court has reviewed the evidence," Judge Alvarez began, her voice crisp and authoritative. "The facts in this case are disturbing. We have a clear chain of title from Walter Bailey to Vivian Bailey. That deed is valid. It is recorded. It reflects the clear intent of the grantor." She picked up a document. "We then have a subsequent deed, purporting to transfer the property to the defendant's LLC. The evidence presented, including forensic analysis, the notary's admission, and the defendant's own internal communications, overwhelmingly proves that Vivian Bailey did not sign this document. The signature is a forgery. The notarization was fraudulent." She looked directly at Martin. "Mr. Bailey, Mrs. Bailey, you attempted to argue that this was a matter of estate management. The court finds this argument disingenuous. You did not manage an estate. You appropriated an asset that did not belong to you. You did so for personal gain, to fund your own business ventures and lifestyle." She took a breath. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that the deed recorded on June 12, 2024, is void ab initio. It is a nullity. It conveyed no title. Consequently, the subsequent transfer to the Coastal Horizons Family Trust is also invalid." A gasp went through the room. I heard Sarah Whitaker sob. "Title to the property at 42 Ocean View Drive is hereby quieted in the name of Vivian Elise Bailey," the judge declared. "You are the legal owner." I closed my eyes. I had won. It was over. "However," the judge continued, "this court is mindful of the innocent third parties. The Whitaker family, they purchased in good faith. While they must vacate the title, they have equitable claims for the improvements they made and the funds they paid. I am ordering a full forensic accounting of the sale proceeds. The defendants, Martin and Elise Bailey, are ordered to restitute the full purchase price to the title insurance company, which will in turn indemnify the Whitakers. Furthermore," Judge Alvarez said, her voice dropping to a steely register, "given the clear evidence of forgery, wire fraud, and subornation of a notary, I am referring this entire record to the District Attorney's Office for review of potential criminal charges against Martin Bailey, Elise Bailey, and Harper Bailey." The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. Elise let out a low moan and slumped against Martin. Her face was the color of ash. Martin sat frozen, staring at the table, his mouth slightly open. He looked like a man watching his own execution. Harper was clutching her purse, her hands shaking so violently the leather was creaking. I looked at them, and I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. There was just a hollow, echoing silence where my family used to be. I turned to look at the Whitakers. They were huddled with their lawyer, looking terrified. "Court is adjourned," the bailiff yelled. Dana turned to me, a smile breaking across her face. "You did it, Vivian. You won. You got it back." "I did," I said quietly. I stood up and walked over to the defense table. Martin looked up at me, His eyes were dull, defeated. "I hope it was worth it," he rasped. "You destroyed us." "No, Dad," I said. "You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped paying the bill." I turned away from him and walked toward the gallery. I stopped in front of the Whitakers. Sarah looked up at me, her eyes red. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "We didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. "Can we talk? Outside?" We met in a small coffee shop down the street. It was awkward at first. David Whitaker was defensive. Sarah was weepy. But when I laid out my proposal, the tension broke. "I don't want to kick you out," I said. "I know you have a son. I know you love the place." "We put everything we had into that down payment," David said, rubbing his eyes. "If we lose the house, even if we get the money back eventually, it takes months, years. We have nowhere to go." "I want to keep the title," I said. "It was my grandfather's gift. I can't sell it, but I can rent it to you, long term, for a fair price. You can stay as tenants until you are ready to move, or until we figure out a rent-to-own situation down the road. The insurance settlement will pay off your mortgage, so you will get your down payment back. You will have cash." Sarah looked at me, stunned. "You would do that? After everything?" "My grandfather wanted that place to be a sanctuary," I said. "He wouldn't want it to be the reason a family ended up on the street. You felt the love in the walls, right? That was him. I want you to keep feeling it." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you." It wasn't a perfect solution. I was still a landlord. They were still tenants in a house they thought they owned, but it was human. It was clean. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The district attorney took the referral seriously. 2 weeks after the trial, Martin and Elise were indicted on charges of forgery, grand larceny, and wire fraud. Harper was named as an unindicted co-conspirator. She cut a deal to testify against them in exchange for probation. The scandal was the talk of Arden Falls. My parents were asked to resign from the country club. Martin's business partners pulled out of Ridgepoint, and the development went into receivership. They were facing financial ruin and potential prison time. I didn't relish it. I didn't celebrate. I just watched it happen from a distance, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I received a voicemail from Martin a month later. "Vivian, I hope you're happy. The lawyers say we might lose the house. Your mother is on antidepressants. You have destroyed this family. Do not ever contact us again." I listened to it once, then I deleted it. Elise sent a text at 2 a.m. "I'm sorry we didn't tell you, but you didn't have to go this far. We are your parents. How could you?" I didn't reply. I sat on my bed and opened my contacts. I scrolled to Dad. I hit delete. I scrolled to Mom. I hit delete. I scrolled to Harper. I hesitated for a moment, remembering the little sister I used to braid hair for. Then I hit delete. They were just names now. Names on a court docket. The following Friday, I drove to Seabrook Dunes. It was late autumn, and the coast was empty. The sky was a bruised purple, and the wind whipped the seagrass flat against the dunes. I parked in the visitor spot at the tides. The Whitakers were away visiting family for the weekend, so the condo was empty. They had left a key for me under the mat, just in case I wanted to inspect the property. I walked up the stairs, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled the same: salt, old wood, and faint lemon. The Whitakers had kept it beautiful. The hardwood floors gleamed, but my eyes went straight to the wall above the sofa. The painting was there, the watercolor seagull, standing on its piling, alone, but dignified. I walked over to it and ran my fingers along the frame. I touched the driftwood coffee table, tracing the knot that looked like a sleeping eye. "I am here, Grandpa," I whispered. The silence of the room wrapped around me. It wasn't the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of peace. I walked out to the balcony and looked at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the shore, relentless and eternal. I had lost my family. I had lost the illusion of safety. I had walked through fire and burned down the only life I had known. But standing there, holding the cold metal of the railing, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt solid. I had drawn a line. I had refused to be erased. I had taken the boring share, the practical share, and I had defended it with everything I had. I wasn't Martin's daughter anymore. I wasn't Harper's sister. I was Vivian Bailey. And I was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of betrayal, justice, and finding the strength to stand up for yourself, even when it means standing alone. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with family? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. We have many more tales of justice coming your way. Share your thoughts in English, and I will see you in the next one.